So now this panel discussion will explore how technology has shaped and dominated the way we live and how real estate developers can further respond to the needs of the people today by building intelligent and connected homes. In line with this, I would like to introduce our esteemed set of panelists who are here to discuss how the home has changed and how we are keeping up with the new normal through connectivity features. We are joined today by Joey Bondoc, Senior Research Manager for Colliers International Philippines. We also have with us Rouen Raz, Vice President for Sales and Marketing for DataLand. Janlo de los Reyes, Head of Research and Consulting for JLL, is also here with us. And Debbie Obias, Head of Business Development and New Business for Globe at Home Broadband Business for Globe Telecom. Also with us is Michelle Ysmael-Ora, Director and Head of Strategic Property Business Development for Globe Telecom. On behalf of Lamudi, I would like to thank you all for joining us today for this interesting and timely discussion about the new changes at home. Now, before we start this panel discussion, we would like to acknowledge our partners for this event, Globe Telecom, the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, and our official broadcast media partner, ANC. Now let's dive right into the topic now, the rise of intelligent homes, reshaping the modern Filipino home. Let me start off with Globe. Debbie, Michelle, how did people's digital communication practices change during this COVID-19 pandemic? What do these changes in people's digital communication mean for society in general?
Hi, Raine. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us in today's session. This pandemic has really changed everyone's lives for the past, I would say 10 months or almost a year, right? I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, as you all have experienced these in the last 10 months, where most of us were confined in our homes. You see our kids doing learn from home online classes, right? We have been doing Zoom meetings at home with our colleagues. And on weekends, we're just staying home watching Netflix, Amazon Prime, everything that we can find online, right? We need that for our sanity. So that's how we have learned to cope with the pandemic that happened. So imagine if we continue to live this way in the next year without connectivity. We used to be traveling outside, dining out, going to the gym, going to work, and now we are just here at home. And yet, because of connectivity, we're still able to continue to do a lot of these things at home. Right, Debbie?
Yeah, that's why during this lockdown, we in Globe, and I guess the rest of our colleagues in the telco industry, we had the busiest time of our lives. We had to keep up with the demand of our consumers, especially when it comes to providing fast and reliable internet services. Like even doing the groceries, you're using the app and it's delivered right at your doorstep. Consultations with doctors are done online as well. And even the small businesses are forced to open online stores as their physical stores are closed. And even mobile banking is becoming the norm. GCash last year had the highest transactions, reaching 1 trillion pesos. Rain, before this pandemic, Globe has been really pushing to increase digital adoption and, fast track digital transformation for years. But, both for the consumers and even small businesses. So in a few months, this pandemic has really transformed the lives of everyone and even the businesses through digital technology.
That's true, Debbie.
Right.
And with lockdowns and other social distancing measures in effect in many parts of the country, Rain, and with more people relying on internet for information and advice, LGUs are being urged to deploy effective technologies to contain the outbreak. This is the new normal, Rain, with digital communication practices embraced dramatically with unprecedented speed. So telco companies like us are ensuring there is fast mobile and broadband connection to allow consumers like you and I to reinvent our home and allow us to still survive and even thrive during this pandemic.
Right, and you really were forced to step up so fast and react to this pandemic as fast as you can. But we are now again in a new era. It's a new normal. It's a new era of work, learning, and entertainment where connectivity through digital platforms have become a prominent part, perhaps a permanent part of our everyday lives at home. What changes do you think are here to stay?
The changes that happened during the pandemic and COVID-19 has really changed our lives in the past 10 months. People really relying on fast internet. And these changes in people's lives have made them realize how technology has made our lives easier, di ba? Parang being able to do things in a faster, more efficient manner just by, few taps on their phone. And this is already the new normal. And we see that organizations will embrace work from home. Online learning for sure is here to stay. And, people will still utilize food and grocery deliveries. Online shopping will not stop. And mobile payment and mobile banking will be the norm, definitely. And even the online medical consultations, we have telehealth services like Consulta MD and Aiden. I'm sure there are new companies popping up. So even the home gyms, you attend your spinning classes through Zoom, you purchase all these equipment at home. And most importantly, I guess a lot of people here would have Netflix, and you can't live without the streaming videos, YouTube, and it would probably replace watching free TV. So this digital lifestyle will definitely remain as people are getting used to it, and I think for some they would actually enjoy it because of its convenience. And if you look at the property sector, so we have seen a lot of changes also that happened last year. Property tours are done virtually. I've seen a lot of YouTube channels from brokers or sellers showcasing homes, di ba? By highlighting the intelligent home features. Some would have the elevators inside their homes in some high-end houses. So I think it's really critical that property developers and even brokers or sellers are really able to capture the interest of their potential buyers. So this can be done by differentiating yourself, so differentiating themselves when it comes to pushing their property online. And I think one way to differentiate is to highlight the high-tech features. Even I think property management as well, we've seen changes, technological changes. There are some who have come up with apps that allow safe and contactless transactions. Some property managers are possibly considering contactless elevator buttons, or something that could be controlled via an app or via voice, as more people are more concerned about their safety and health. And I'm sure there are more innovations out there addressing the needs of the customers today.
Right. Michelle, well, Debbie was mentioning earlier about the property developers. We'll touch more on the security later, but onto the property developers. For DataLand, Rouen, in the context of today's COVID-19 reality, have you observed a shift in property seekers' attitudes towards smart home and connectivity?
Absolutely. Okay. Number one, developers have been, to a certain extent, the type of offerings that you have are typical. You have a swimming pool, a gym, you have some play area, all right, some gardens. No, I think with the pandemic, there is a shift, and we are now rethinking, of course, our future projects. So this is where, for example, our friends from Globe will have to come in and help us, of course, plan for this. For example, if you look at what the market wants, all right, they want more open space, all right. I'd imagine if you had an air-conditioned gym, you probably will need to have more gym areas that are for the outdoor, all right. I think depends again on the market segment that you're catering. The swimming pool, you don't have to actually have a big pool. At the end of the day, you want to have more open space, gardens, all right? In terms of, for example, the infra also of the construction or the developers. No? Number one, you have elevators that you'll need just in RFI card. You don't have to push the button, right? You would like to have a hallway that has open spaces, or meaning open windows, so that light and air can come in. I mean, I've seen condo developments where you're like enclosed in a hallway. You will be seeing more condo offerings that will have, of course, light coming in, air coming in, and I think that's how we will. That's how the real estate industry will look at adjusting in terms of this period. No? However, there are already developers are offering this. No, you're also seeing, for example, we offer also an office tower. We're constructing office tower along EDSA, Quezon City, and we are now looking at really smart office towers. So it will be dependent on the availability of infra. It will be dependent on the cost of this smart homes, and I think that will drive the demand. If you have a affordable smart home, then you will be seeing a lot of requests or demand from the buyers.
Right. Perhaps as a follow-up question, Rouen, these intelligent homes that you're talking about, does it mean premium pricing, or is there value pricing possible for those whose budgets are quite tight?
Well, I think number one, a number of construction companies, developers, are actually now shifting to more technology use. No? For example, the way I mentioned, DataLand has a precast facility in Batangas, and that precast facility allows you to have a wall that is precast. I mean, you it's not like you do the hollow blocks and finish it. This is a complete wall, allows you better insulation. To a certain extent, you may not call it as a real smart feature, but it is future-proofing your home. Better insulation, and therefore allows us to actually offer the same price. Because if you'll be spending more on labor versus using technology that can cut down, may actually be more expensive, but cuts down on labor costs, then you are actually more like having the same price, but with a better home.
Understood. Talk about future-proofing your homes. Michelle, I noticed that you also forge strategic partnerships with certain developers. And how many have you forged, and how have these contributed to the bottom line, or perhaps subscription or brand image of Globe? Perhaps we can start with Michelle and then Debbie afterwards.
Okay. So we have been working closely with the real estate sector in the last 16, 18 years. My team was created specifically meant to partner with property developers like Rouen here, DataLand, and everyone else in the industry. We work practically with everybody, and we make sure that for every upcoming development that these real estate property developers have, Globe should be there before the first resident or the first customer moves into their property. Whether the property is a residential condominium, whether that's a BPO office commercial building, even if it's a mall, or if it's a hotel development. I know with DataLand, we are working with them closely for some of their hotel developments. And even gated horizontal subdivisions is part of what we make sure that Globe is there. And I just want to go back to what Rouen mentioned earlier about availability of infra and availability of technology in their buildings. And really, the basic requirement there, the fundamental requirement there, is the telco infrastructure. And that infrastructure needs to be fiber so that all the other intelligent building solutions that Rouen mentioned earlier will become available to the residents, to the end users. That's really what needs to happen today. And if I may add at this point, one of the things that we're really trying to do is to influence not just the real estate sector, but even government to have that digital mindset, right? Because when you have that digital mindset, then what happens next is really enabling everybody in the ecosystem to enjoy and to be able to have the solutions needed for every type of customer, for every type of lifestyle, right? In fact, in other countries, it is a must for every building, for every development, to have fiber ready at the onset. So we have worked a long time with these property developers, Rain, and we hope to continue to be partnering with them. And if I may add also at this point, one of the game-changing things we have done so far with our partners is not just to have fiber-ready developments, but really ensure that also it's built in with broadband before it's turned over to the unit owners.
When you buy a unit, you already have electricity and water. So it's a must that even the internet connectivity should also be there. So we also have that the discussion with the property developers, depending on the target market of a certain property. We can also customize depending on the need of the property. So for instance, if there is a need for intelligent devices, we could also bundle it together with our broadband services.
Yes.
Mhm. Right, and that's all about globe connected home devices, if I'm not mistaken. Connectivity all the
Yes.
way from hardware to your outlets and multi-purpose sensors. Is that correct?
Yes.
And of course, this is all towards the Internet of Things. And really, would you consider this a leap toward future-proofing homes? Earlier, we were talking about offline about how fiber is good, is all about preparing for the future. And partnering with all these developers doesn't necessarily mean an exclusive agreement to be the only provider in the building. Michelle?
That's correct, Rain. When we partner with our property developers, the intention more than anything else is really to enable their developments to become digital savvy, future proof, and be ready for whatever changes in customer needs that may happen in the future. So while we partner with them, there is also that intent to help them with their brand image, right? To help build the brand equity and ultimately sell, make these properties easier to sell. That can actually be the differentiator that can be offered to the buyers. Now, the baseline now becomes your developments should be fiber ready, right? And the differentiator is when you have built-in connectivity, built-in broadband. To Debbie's point earlier, can you imagine, Rouen, turning over a unit to a buyer with no power and water? Today, people look for power, water, and internet. And I have spoken to
Internet.
a lot of customers whose one of their decision, the one of the things that will make them decide to buy if there is strong and reliable connectivity in that development.
Totally agree. And I mean, aside from the internet or the basic internet or the built-in internet, you've mentioned about becoming future-proofing the homes, and I think this is a basic requirement. But if we really want to go a step further, then we could offer all other devices or products that could really be customized specific to the needs of the customers of a particular development. You might say that in first world countries, it's already the norm to have IoT. And here in the Philippines, we're not yet ready for that. But currently, only a few luxury homes in high-end condominiums or high-end subdivisions would have this. And normally, they get a contractor, probably, with home automation expertise. And this really targets the premium or luxury segment. But I think I've also read in your research in Lamudi that the buyers of condos now are the millennials. And these are, first-time homeowners. So these are the condo dwellers. They're very digitally savvy. And some of them would purchase the intelligent home devices for ambiance purposes. So they buy the Alexa Echo Dot from online, or they purchase smart plugs in Lazada or Shopee. Yeah, that's a growing segment, and we should be ready for that. But for the rest of the customers, there is not much awareness on home automation yet, but they're familiar with home entertainment devices like a smart TV or an Apple TV or Android TV box. But earlier, we've mentioned about the changes observed during this pandemic, and we see that these are indicators that we may be progressing towards this new era of connectivity. So we all should be ready for that. In the near future, we see probably people using voice assistants like the Alexas and or the Google Home, which could aid us in our day-to-day needs without heavy investments to power the intelligent home. So we just need to keep in mind that these devices or voice-activated devices can become mainstream in the Filipino home in the future, but it must go beyond just novelty. So, example, parang it has to be really relevant for the customer using voice assistants for hands-free support while cooking, or it can even help a child in his online learning. And there are actually a lot of relevant use cases. So, in other words, currently it's just ambiance to have those IoT devices, but it has to go beyond that for the mass market to consider buying it. Of course, pricing also is a major factor. So, but to be able to do all these, we need first to connect the home with reliable and fiber fast connectivity. And that, as mentioned by Mitch, that is the basic or minimum requirement now for all the homes, because once it's in place, it would really prepare everyone for adoption to IoT later on, or intelligent homes later on.
Right. You mentioned Lamudi's study earlier, and it did just come out that in the most recent study that says people are living large in smaller spaces. That many condo dwellers are living or demanding or looking for spaces that are less than 50 square meters, or even 12 to 18 square meters only in highly urbanized areas. But they're seeing these retail commercial spaces as an extension of their homes, but it still sounds like a huge investment. Rouen, how important is it to invest in developments that offer smart features and home connectivity amenities? Right, earlier Debbie was saying it's not the norm just yet, but it will be.
Raine, I think if you look at it, it will be driven by demand. All right. For example, pandemic happened. All right. You wanted to, of course, visit your mother, who is actually living in another house, or your lola. What happens is that because of the situation, they are forced actually to learn about the Internet of Things, and therefore it is critical that you have that infra because there will be a demand. All right. Let me also put it this way. A number of families have been living in ancestral homes, all right? And a certain market segment, for example, the old people, they'd probably say you'd like them to be safe, secure in their home. And, having your mom and dad transfer to a condominium while you take on the ancestral home is actually a fantastic deal, all right? Why? Because the condominium doesn't have stairs they need to go up to. You have a small garden downstairs that you can they want to be there. Again, you don't need a huge area for a condominium unit because it will be harder for them to maintain. And if you are in a condominium development, you have property management helping you actually with the maintenance. So I think it will be a trend that a lot of people will start to look at condominium residents, and then we will actually see a lot of also empty nesters going to these projects. And if you have all these features, if you have the smart home, then makes actually living easier. I've seen that. For example, you go into your condominium unit, because of the smart light, it turns on. All right, even without touching the switch. So you'll have more of this, and it is about the infra. It is about also the equipment, and that allows you to have a smart home and a future proofing your home.
Right. Well, now on to Joey. Colliers has said that the e-commerce sector, retailers have started to shift to the online space and partner with delivery platforms. Of course, we've seen lots of delivery platforms being more active, especially during this pandemic. And this should result in the retailers' aggressive adoption of the omni-channel approach, which requires an adequate and versatile network of logistics infrastructure. What has this translated into in properties?
Well, definitely, Rain, we have seen a lot of demand right now in terms of warehouses. So, what we have seen previously is that developers have really ramped up their construction and modernization of warehouses. And even pre pandemic, we already saw that a lot of developers have been trying to modernize their warehouses because even pre pandemic, there has been a rising demand for e-commerce, for online shopping. So for developers, especially the traditional ones, to be able to tap this demand for logistics facilities, warehouses, what they did was they modernized their existing warehouses. But what's interesting now, Rain, is that because of the lockdown economy and the Philippines still being a consumer driven economy, 60-70% of our economy is still depending on or relying on personal consumption expenditure. So we now see a greater demand for deliveries. And what's complementing this demand is a much higher demand also for logistics facilities. Interestingly, a lot of developers, small owners right now are pivoting to what they see is a rising demand in the market, and that is the conversion of vacant mall spaces into micro warehouses, fulfillment centers within malls. So imagine, because of the slower demand for brick and mortar mall spaces, because of greater demand for online shopping, a lot of Filipinos now shopping from the comforts of their home. And this has induced a greater demand for these logistics facilities. But unfortunately, right now, we do not have enough or adequate traditional warehousing facilities in Metro Manila or even in nearby areas such as Pampanga, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, which previously were your main hub for these industrial or logistics facilities. So what mall operators have been doing now is that they have been pivoting to what the market requires at this point, and that is having fulfillment centers within Metro Manila, because after all, much of these deliveries are happening within Metro Manila. The region only accounts for what, 11% of the country's population, but it churns out or contributes about 38% to the country's GDP. So it's no longer surprising to see all these deliveries now happening within Metro Manila, and that has been resulting in greater demand for these modern and in-mall warehouse facilities in the capital region.
Right. Well, Joey was saying also that all these smart homes connected to the retail centers online, not anymore physical stores. Michelle JLL was also saying that the expectation for the new normal seems to focus also on safety and well-being, technology adoption, and digitalization and flexible work arrangements. Is this reflected in your investments for 2021? And I guess this is more of a question on how much in investments are you making? What weights would you assign or apply in safety, well-being, technology adoption, and digitalization for the coming year and perhaps beyond?
Well, Rain, let me go back to what we were talking about earlier about making sure that when these developments are planned for, we should put in the right telco infrastructure at the onset. So, which is why when we partner with property developers or when we talk to them and we try to find out what kind of development are they trying to build, where, who's the target market, what kind of lifestyle do they want these the community to have, right? Or even if it's a office building, we try to ask and understand what kind of tenants, what kind of industries, who are the expected tenants in the buildings that you're making or you're going to build, because that will now tell us what solutions, what health applications that's needed to support, or security solutions that's needed to enable these developments to thrive and for people to be protected at all times, especially now we're in this kind of situation, right? Anywhere in the world. So if you ask me about what Globe is doing and how much of an investment, we continue to grow our infrastructure build around the country, whether that's in metro cities or even in outskirts. As I have said earlier, we follow where the developments are. In fact, these are indicators for Globe to say where is the next wave city, where is the next big community that will be built, because most definitely there will be connectivity requirements there. And we make sure that we support that. Because in Globe, we have seen and we believe that once you support a community, a development with the right infrastructure, it's going to thrive. And one community at a time that we support that thrives because of connectivity contributes to the economy. So there is this program in Globe which we call First World Internet PH, and that's an advocacy that we have continued every year to support. And because we believe that connectivity is an enabler of GDP, right? Once you have connectivity, businesses will flourish, lifestyles will flourish. And connectivity today in this pandemic, I cannot overemphasize that. It's very important. Joey and Rouen have shared earlier how people's choices and demands have changed, right? And I agree with what Joey said about he has seen the transformation or the change in plans in some developments where it used to be planned for as a residential development. Some properties have turned it into warehouse. We've seen that in some of our discussions with property developers. So yes, we continue to support where the property sector is going. Globe will be there.
Aside from the fact that we'll be there to provide the basic connectivity, we can actually fast track the adoption of having connected homes, intelligent homes, and even intelligent cities. So what we can do together is really target the customer during the time they are purchasing the home or even building or renovating a home. We should partner with real estate developers as well as even the brokers early on, because that's the time where the customers are in their right frame of mind to consider really automating their home with intelligent devices. So I think it's really the partnership between the real estate industry and the telco that would really drive or increase adoption, growing the intelligent home segment in the Philippines.
Right. And onto the property developer side, Rouen, did the forced or accelerated digitalization affect the timetables of your developments in the near term and medium term? You said that you were forced to kind of change tact because of the pandemic and after the lockdowns and the construction stoppages last year. Can we say that constructions everywhere are back in full swing and our timetables are back on track? What about your marketing calendars and delivery dates? Has, for example, adopting fiber into your buildings changed all these timetables?
Right. I think number one, you need to make sure that as far as for example, construction is concerned, it is not yet 100%, but it's starting to again catch up, because part of the restrictions that you want or the restrictions that the government created was, if you actually have construction workers, you need to actually house them in the project site so that again they stay there longer. There is no contamination, and to a certain extent, you will be limited. But I think you're now seeing more construction work happening, activities happening. So again, we're quickly catching up. All right. As far as the marketing calendar is concerned, to a certain extent, you have seen real estate developers being present in having their booth in the malls, supermarkets. You're not seeing that as as wide as or as extensive, and therefore we are adjusting. We're looking at really online boosting, online selling, and therefore you have, of course, for example, drone shots, right? Virtual walkthroughs that you do to adjust to, of course, what the market wants, right? Even in terms of a handover, we're handing over a our Olive Place show now, we are now really following strict safety protocols, right? So you schedule the handovers to the unit owners, and everyone has to, wear a face shield, a mask, all right, and they're not supposed to touch the elevator button. So we follow that. In terms of a timeline, I'd imagine a number of development or projects will have to ask HLURB some extension because again there was a lockdown, right? Construction activity stopped, and I would imagine there will be requests that the timeline be moved a little farther. But again, it depends on how quickly we can get because Joey mentioned about logistics. Part of this is of course looking at the supplies to finish a condominium, all right? And that is a logistical issue. And I think, again, it all depends on how the other peripheries adjust in terms of how the timelines can be made.
Mhm. Right. I'd like to bring in JLL now. Janlo, on mixed developments, are we seeing smaller retail spaces as Lamudi might have found on their end? Is there less demand for retail spaces in a shift away from physical stores and more to warehouses, the way Colliers also mentioned? Can you describe for us the dynamics of demand and supply and prices of property right now, perhaps by volume of inquiries and value turnover?
Okay, thanks for that. So our view is not necessarily of smaller retail spaces. I think for our view with regard to the entire real estate market, it's more about a reimagined space, taking into account like several factors. And specific to the retail market, we're looking at changing consumer habits. I think we've touched on already about like how many consumers are turning online for their purchases. At the same time, I think something tied to that is really the interplay between the physical and online space, right? Like how do brands make sure that they're catering to the needs of their consumers when they, for example, they enter the store in the future, and how does that integrate in terms of the service that they offer online? Of course, optimizing costs will still underpin a lot of real estate decisions as a lot of brands, retailers are still looking at how do they rationalize their spaces to make sure that the margins are there. With regard to the other question about the overall market, what we're seeing at least for 2020 is really an uneven growth across the sector. So definitely the heavily affected sectors, retail and hospitality. We saw there like a higher mall vacancy across the metro. At the same time, low occupancies in the hospitality market of around, let's say, 20% as of end 2020. And these factors have translated to the lower, I guess, for rents holding steady for majority of 2020, while room rates in general have remained generally low. And this is because a lot of the offer rates now are mainly for in support of the quarantine facilities, and room rates haven't really moved as much as we've seen in the past couple of years. For the office and residential markets, definitely we've seen a subdued demand overall. And this is again due to the weaker leasing and sale market that's currently being driven by the pandemic. Most of the growth that we've seen in the prices and even take-up was mainly coming from the Q1 of 2020. But if you're going to look at, for example, the subsequent quarters, rental growth for offices remained flat in the remainder part of the year. Meanwhile, for price of residential condominiums, it has also declined in some buildings, but overall it has been generally flat in terms of price growth. If we're going to look at industrial and logistics, and I think Joey has touched on this already, definitely it's one of the bright spots, not only in the Philippines, but across the globe. We were seeing around 250,000 square meters of logistics space that was completed last year. And I guess that echoes the sentiment of everyone of the growing e-commerce. At the same time, the increase in terms of the demand for better quality facilities among logistics players in general.
Mhm. Right. Well, DataLand, Rouen, you mentioned earlier that you have intelligent home project that you're building in Ortigas. You also have a township project in Tuguegarao City, Cagayan Province, quite far from Metro Manila. Is this among the locations that we should be expecting to see a surge in demand this year? Plus, Joey from Colliers, are the up and coming locations for connected communities and intelligent homes places like Tuguegarao City, and what might be the others?
Okay, Rain, the reason why we wanted a township in Tuguegarao is number one, of course, the owners come from Cagayan province. So it's our way of, giving back to the province. Second, if you look at Cagayan, Tuguegarao, it's an agri-based area. But you would like, of course, shift it also to have service industries. And that's the reason why we want to create a township, so that we can create more opportunities for those who are actually living in Tuguegarao and Cagayan. You have, good schools there, and therefore BPOs and KPOs can actually set up their offices in that township. And this is where I think our partners with Globe and the other telcos will have to come in, because if you want a PESA accredited township, you need to make sure that all the infra is actually ready. And I think that's the reason why we wanted to make sure that as you plan for this, you want to bring in your tech partners so that you can create better values to your customers.
Well, for speaking of demand, Rain, previously the demand was really focused into the integrated communities. But what we have seen, even before the pandemic, but of course this was highlighted during the pandemic and the lockdowns imposed by the government, is that there has been an increasing demand for residential communities, for residential projects, not just within integrated communities, but also for interconnected and intelligent communities. So there is now a greater need for example, this housing project, this condominium project or house and lot project to have a good connection, internet connection, because we're now doing this very large work from home experiment. And it's very important for all these residential projects, for all these homes to have stable internet, a reliable internet connection. So a lot of queries now in the market that we've been getting and we've been hearing on the ground is not just towards integrated communities, but also for interconnected and intelligent communities. And you mentioned, say, projects in Tuguegarao or in any location, northern central part of Luzon. Of course, we have also been seeing the development of crucial, very important infrastructure project heading towards northern central Luzon. And the demand for all these projects in northern Luzon, for example, has been facilitated or has been complemented by the development of these massive, crucial infrastructure projects that are part of the government's Build program. And at Colliers, we believe that the demand for these projects, for these residential projects outside of Metro Manila, and including those heading towards northern part of Luzon, will again be supported by the completion of these road projects, toll roads, railways that are heading north of Luzon. And we believe that these projects, once completed, will only stoke and spur demand in the residential market. So again, in terms of recovery post-pandemic, all these developments that are being implemented by developers, having an integrated community, having interconnected intelligent communities, and of course banking on the infrastructure projects of the government will definitely help stoke the residential, the property market moving forward.
Right, and of course, we'd have to talk about energy consumption at this point, because all these interconnectivity will mean more consumption for energy. Michelle, how does the telecom industry play a role in supporting real estate developers' initiatives in green and sustainable energy solutions, as well as smart home technologies?
Well, there's a lot that the telecom industry can contribute to support these innovations and new technologies that we're seeing today and the clamor in the market. Number one is to ensure that we continue to accelerate penetration of fixed internet to support these requirements. The need to enable intelligent homes. As Globe, availability of tech squad services, and maybe Debbie can add to this later, to address consumers' pain points in adapting to new technologies. A lot of our customers who get broadband at home, one of the first things they would need help on is how do I make my home an intelligent home, especially for those who's doing it for the first time, right? How do I configure the settings of my IoT devices and what I have here so that it fits into what I need, into my lifestyle, and to continue growing, evolving that setup. Number two, and as I have mentioned earlier as well, is that close partnership and collaboration between property developers and Globe Telecom. So that will allow for future proofing upcoming developments. And if Globe is involved early on during the design and planning phase of the property, that will be the best time to really build the infrastructure and integrate it as the construction progresses. And number three, it's really influencing the real estate industry to have that digital savvy mindset for their developments. Future proof with fiber, right? Put fiber today so that we are able to provide and support what is needed for that the demands of intelligent home. Can you imagine you turn over a property? As I've said earlier, you cannot turn over a property without power and water. Same with connectivity today. And lastly, I also want to highlight our important role to also provide some sort of advisory role to the government, influence to change and maybe update. And I don't know if Rowan would agree with me, update our national building codes. Because I know the national building code was written way back in the 1930s, and we have so much technology today that's not included there. In fact, in most countries, the government builds the telco infrastructure, the fiber on the roads that you see, it's government who builds that in other countries. So that the telco providers like us, we don't have to deal with the right of way issues and the permitting headache, the red tape that we need to handle later on. So if you go to other countries, that's why you see our closest neighbors having internet speeds 5 to 10 times faster than ours, because all of these things have been paved for them already.
Debbie, would you like to add?
Yeah, Mitch mentioned earlier about how we could help also those who want to have intelligent homes, and they have currently have intelligent devices, but they don't know how to proceed. Here in Globe, what we do is we also have we cater to different segments. Those who are very tech savvy, who can install their devices on their own. But there is a segment in the market who have current devices like the Echo and Google Nest, and they don't know how to install it. What we do is we help them via the Globe Tech Squad. So this is the service being offered by Globe. So aside from just plain connectivity, we have a team who could install all these devices for you and really prepare your home or automate your home and make it an intelligent home.
Right.
We
At this
have
point,
that.
I'd like to draw in JLL. Janlo, are these interconnectivity and intelligent community, as well as green initiatives, become a draw for home buyers? What about the proximity to medical facilities, considering we're in the middle of a pandemic, or even religious or commercial or open recreational spaces, as Colliers also mentioned earlier? Have those become an attraction or even perhaps a turnoff for some buyers? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Michelle already mentioned this earlier, but this, I guess, number one, safety and wellness has become one of the key elements of decision making by buyers. At the same time, strong connectivity is there, especially now that we have work arrangements and learning expectations wherein we're doing mostly, I guess everyone else is doing it in the confines of their homes. And that has really dictated, for example, demand preference, at least for consumers that we're seeing now. With regard to your question about proximity to, let's say, medical facilities, religious institutions, and open spaces, I think access to these complementary developments have always been a positive appeal to buyers, even before this pandemic. And I think what this pandemic has done is really more bring heightened interest for these types of amenities within community. So I would say it's really a plus for buyers at this point for developments or township or even residential condominiums to have these types of amenities within their projects.
Ruwen, are you seeing the same trend? These facilities remain to be a draw for home buyers?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you look at the home buyers, access is very, very important, and therefore access to points of interest, hospitals, schools, transport access. That really, when you have that, to a certain extent, your prices can actually go up. Right? If your location is a not so good location, then you can't, of course, provide or give higher prices. So yes, it will continue to drive the choice in terms of a buyer, and therefore having this closer to home provides value to the buyers.
Well, Michelle was saying earlier that fiber connectivity in certain locations actually have they driven demand for spaces in those areas, or is it vice versa? Spaces have demanded fiber in those areas. What kind of properties do you see locating in such areas? And tell us more about your coordination with the LGUs. Have they been demanding more connectivity because of the pandemic, because of the demands for e-learning?
That's very true, Rain. They have been they have been awakened to the importance of making sure that your mobile signal is complemented with the right number of cell sites so that people are able to make calls anywhere. They are now aware more than ever that fiber rollout should be should be supported by government. And we are very happy to say that they have been very cooperative already. I know some of you may have seen the meeting our president had with President Duterte, and that was really a very welcome support that was extended to us, and that demonstrated our desire and our intent to really make sure that fiber and mobile signal is is provided by Globe across the country. And you are correct to say earlier also that we do follow where the property developers will build. And once the construction happens, whether that's in Tuguegarao or here in Manila, far down south, we will build our infrastructure there. Because as I've said, when we find an upcoming residential condominium, and if especially if it's a dense area, right, we see in the plans that there are a lot of buildings that's going to be constructed. We have to plan for it 3-4 years before the completion of the building, and we are a country composed of several islands, and for us to deploy and build that fiber across the country is a very big challenge, right? Apart from the red tape, the topography is something that we need to deal with. So, yes, advanced planning, advanced fiber rollout, everything needs to be front loaded. So, to allow for more planning and better execution of the facilities, we need to align in every LGU. Is this a residential zone? Is this a commercial zone? Those things we need to consider when we plan and roll out for the infrastructure. So we work closely with DataLand, with everyone in the real estate sector, and ensure that we are made aware. We need to make sure we know where the next residential condominium is, where the next office BPO building is, so that we are able to influence as well our network rollout and tell them this is where you should connect the next or build the next fiber.
To add to that, in terms of partnership with the LGU, one of the goals of Globe is to really connect everyone, every Filipino's home. And it's really not just the ABC market, but even the lower segment. So they're the ones that were really affected during this pandemic. So it's not just, talking to the property developers, but being able to provide connectivity everywhere, especially the provincial areas or even the resettlement areas where they can't even afford a modem. We also have Wi-Fi for this particular segment. And we do also partner with property developers who have mass housing. And we could also offer that to provide basic connectivity. And it's not just mobile data, but fast connectivity at home.
Perhaps as a final question, I'll take this as a lump sum when it comes to investments in properties. Rouen, you were saying that now is the best time to invest in properties while interest rates are low, while the GDP is set to rise this year. Would you be able to share with us how much of your properties are invested in smart home or intelligent home technology, perhaps in the past year alone? And perhaps for Joey as well as Janlo, how do you see investors moving funds, or do you see investors moving funds into properties right now because of the intelligent home technology? What would the trend look like? What does the trend look like since the start of the pandemic a year ago? Let's start with Rouen first. And
Maybe.
final words, maybe.
All right. Number one, I think we wanted to check first the target market that we're catering to. I mean, that's very important because at the end of the day, it's about affordability. It's about, of course, the prices. And therefore, you want to make sure that when you do the smart homes, you can actually offer it to the target market that you're targeting. So what we're trying to do now is actually, because we've done projects already in the past, and therefore, what we will try to do is, as we look at the future, then we will, of course, relook at our plans, bring in people who are conversant about technology, IoT, so that we can actually offer something 3 years from now when the building is done, 4 years from now, we can offer something of value, all right? And I think that's the way we will look at it. And to me, really, it's about creating the future. If you create the railroad, I think the trains will come, and that's, I think, how we should all look at this business.
Joey?
Where we're seeing a demand for smart buildings, smart homes, smart condominium projects all over Metro Manila. In fact, at Colliers, one of our key recommendations for investors, for buyers, is to look at condominium projects that are adaptable to this work from home scheme being implemented right now by a lot of companies, because we believe that work from home will be for the long haul, will probably be part of the real estate requirements or the work schemes that will be implemented by a lot of companies moving forward, even post-pandemic. So for us, we believe that investors should be looking at structures, buildings, condominium towers that can easily adapt to this work from home scheme. Make sure that these are smart residential towers wherein they're interconnected. They can do cloud computing. They can have immediate access to the data that they need so that they can efficiently work from home. Of course, what's important now is to invest not just in a spacious unit when you can carve out your own home office, but also make sure that once you are in that condominium unit, you can work efficiently. And that means having a stable internet connection. That's why a key consideration, we believe, especially for a lot of first-time residential investors, is to make sure that these condo units that they buy are adaptable to this work from home scheme. And we believe that on the developer side, represented by Rowan, this is something that they can leverage on, especially developers that have new projects, because now they can maximize this demand that we're seeing in the market. And that, of course, points to this residential investors, early nesters, mid-income professionals that have really been investing on these condominium units that they believe will help them work efficiently and complement the type of a job and support them with the job requirements that they have moving forward. So again, every investor we believe is opportunistic in nature. And aside from taking advantage of very competitive mortgage rates that we see in the market now, we believe that they will really maximize the availability of all these smart high-tech condominium buildings that are being developed and that are in the pipeline of several developers within or outside Metro Manila.
Thank you so much, Joey. Janlo?
Yeah, just to build on what they said. So I think overall, the way we look at the market is it's been relatively improved compared to the previous year, but it's still largely subdued given the weak sentiment that we're seeing in the market. I think the appeal of intelligent homes, we suspect that that will grow moving forward. And I say that because we're seeing now, and even last year, a greater openness and I would say appreciation for these features, right? Especially as we look at it from the health and wellness perspective, at the same time, a greater technology adoption across demographics. Definitely, I mean, I think the panelists already discussed the advantages of these features and how these are integral to the work expectation, I guess the next normal as we transition to that. And I think that would further grow in terms of interest as we look at the incoming population, this young generation, which are more digitally savvy and basically digital natives compared to the older demographic. And I think that's just going to increase the interest and marketability for intelligent homes moving forward.
Thank you so much, Janlo, and Rouen, and Joey. Now, that does it for our roundtable discussion today. Panelists, thank you so much for sharing your expert insights with us. We really learned so much about the property industry, the new normal at home, and how technology is playing a bigger part in all aspects of life. That concludes our panel discussion, The Rise of Intelligent Homes, Reshaping the Modern Filipino Home. Once again, thank you, Joey, Rouen, Janlo, Debbie, and Michelle for sharing your insightful thoughts about post-pandemic trends and how the property sector is shaping up. It was a pleasure having you here today. Now, once again, we would like to thank our event partners, Globe Telecom, the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, and our official broadcast media partner, ANC. This has been Raine Musngi of ANC, wishing you all an excellent week ahead.